Where do you want to start?
Right. What did the AI say?
Oh yeah, okay. I've got it here. Let me. I thought it was pretty good actually. Um,
Yeah.
it basically concluded that our values are almost identical, um, but that our personalities are
Mm.
different, which is like, yeah,
Oh,
makes sense.
yeah. That's
Um,
an interesting view on it. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's actually
So
exactly what you were saying. Hmm.
yeah, which maybe just
Kinda.
copied
Yeah.
me because it read the transcript. But it's yeah, it basically thought that like in terms of just on the personality bit, it basically thought that I was a bit more kind of long term, bigger picture, and you were more
Mm.
like pragmatic, get it done now. Um,
Oh, that does feel like me.
and I was a bit
That
more
does feel like
diplomatic. You're a
me.
bit more outspoken. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
That
which I
no,
thought,
I
yeah,
think that is. Yeah. We never said those words. Those are. That I think that's kind of an accurate. What's interesting about AI is you can just dump a bunch of data at it, and it sees things that you don't,
yeah, yeah,
which is useful. Very interesting.
yeah. And
But
actually, one of
what?
so the values.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the values are interesting. The first one is compassion and minimizing suffering, which
Mm-hmm.
which I thought I've actually been thinking about this a lot since we had whatever it was episode before last, I think episode 5,
Mm-hmm.
when we were talking about veganism, and well, actually, we followed it up in the last episode as well.
We've been
And this
talking about
tension
a
of
long time,
suffering,
Tom.
huh?
You dropped a bombshell. We've been talking about the same thing for quite a few episodes now.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
yeah,
But the tension of suffering sometimes being good, and like,
yeah,
for example, when you do exercise, or you intentionally stress yourself in
mm,
some way, or even put your kids through a challenge, for example.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
the tension in like the word suffering, and actually some suffering is good suffering, and I
yeah,
think I sort of came to the conclusion before I ran this through the AI, um, that compassion is a nice word. We talked about it because it sort of alludes to a, trying to minimize that negative suffering. It's sort of
yeah.
empathetic towards other beings, even to yourself, um, but it doesn't rule out positive suffering in that sense. So I quite like that.
Should we? Can I make a point? Should we? I've
Shall I
got
give you
a
the
couple
whole?
of points to make on that, or should we
Yeah.
wait? Go through. Yeah, no. Look, I'm
Shall I give you
scared
the
I'm
whole
gonna go
list?
off on the. Yeah, give us a whole list, because otherwise
Okay.
we can go off a tangent for half an
Yeah.
hour, and then yeah,
Okay. So compassion and minimizing suffering is value one. Value
yeah.
two, integrity and authenticity.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
value three, curiosity and critical thinking.
Yeah.
Value four is holistic sustainability, what it means by this is like thinking about the bigger picture, like the moral bigger picture of what we mean by sustainability, rather than thinking of sustainability as purely a technical challenge.
Mm,
Um, and then, which I'm not sure that's really a value, but anyway.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
and then the final one was empathy and connection.
Okay. I mean, I think the good points that it's extracted. I wouldn't quite say they are structured how I would structure like values, but I think
Mm,
they're good discussion topics.
yeah.
So I think it's interesting diving into the first one, because I thought it was quite interesting what Oliver Wink said on I know you responded. I haven't had a chance to see how you responded to him, Jan, on LinkedIn, but he made the point about endurance,
Mm,
how you can. It's about enduring as much suffering as you can take. um is There's an aspect to that, isn't there? So like I you know um I do want to eat some food every now and again. That's nice. But enduring, so make sure that I kind of eat food that has been caused the least suffering. um that's kind of an endurance that I'm doing. Like I could just go screw it, I'm just gonna kill a whale and eat like a little bit of a fin and then chuck the rest away. But that's not like I'm not enduring anything there, right? So there's an
mm,
endurance. And what was interesting about that is because everything that we were talking about was immeasurable.
Yeah.
Whereas the aspect of that is you can measure your own endurance. You can measure your own endurance.
Yeah.
Which is, it was interesting because it kind of like takes you taking on somebody else, something else's suffering is you enduring it. And when we talk about shared suffering, like you can either share suffering in like, oh mate, I feel really sorry for you, I'm sharing your suffering, or shared suffering is like I'm taking some of your suffering and I'm taking it off your shoulders and I'm literally sharing your suffering, which is almost like an endurance. I'm taking some of your suffering
Yeah.
and bringing it onto myself. So that was one thing. But then I was also thinking about it how, you know, maybe it is a balance, because that's kind of how, you know, there's, I'll go back to that suffering's got to be worth it. It's like a balance. Like the worth it is some abstract weight on one end of the balance, and the suffering is some abstract weight on some other end of the balance. And then it's just a conversation about that balance. And then just, I suppose, it's a conversation about I want to maximize my value, but also minimize the suffering.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maximize the value and minimize. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's interesting. And it ties in with, like you said, the actual root of the word compassion is suffering together. And I think like framing that in the context of like to exercise compassion is to actually almost like sacrifice. You're sacrificing a bit yourself in terms of suffering in order to protect somebody else a bit. So there is some skin off your back effectively. And then like Oliver's highlighting, it's like, how far are you prepared to go? There's a line for everybody about how far you're prepared to go. I'm not quite sure though about the measurement of it for two reasons. One, I'm not quite sure how you do measure that in reality. And two, I used to believe in that saying that you can't manage what you can't measure. That's sort of the classic marketing maxim. I don't really believe it anymore because I've come to the conclusion that most of the things that really, really matter in life are immeasurable. I mean, when I say they're immeasurable, I don't mean you can't, I don't mean you can't kind of rate them on some sort of intuitive level. I just mean you can't put them on a graph in a way that you could write it up in a scientific paper and say like, this is objectively better than the other option.
I even talk about how, like, one of my big messages I give out there is that, or I try to give out there these days, is that everybody believes that measuring something is telling you the truth about like some truth about some objective reality. But even when we have like conversations about kind of metaphysics and kind of the nature of consciousness and everything, like even what we're measuring isn't really a objective reality. It's just our perception of a quantity of an object, right? So see, I always say, like, we think when we measure something, it's telling us something true about the world. But when I actually coach people, and I coach generally, that all that a measure is something that incentivizes behavior. And I actually say that is it.
Yeah.
That's all that a measure is it something that incentivizes behavior. Like I even talk about it in terms of like, you know, carbon emissions and carbon measurements. And, you know, we know all the limitations. I mean, because I do standards around measurements. So, you know, all the benefits of an accounting methodology, which does that scope 1, 2, and 3 accounting, it's not really telling you anything. It's just incentivizing a certain amount of behaviors. Some behaviors that a lot of people don't agree with, and some behaviors a lot of people do agree with.
Yeah,
it's just a decision regarding what to incentivize. So that's kind of like when so fundamentally when I think about this, I just think about it as like just the act of measuring is just something that again just incentivizes a behavior of yours. I'm not too sure how that links into kind of measuring suffering, but
Yeah.
I feel I'm aligned to you in that statement that, but in so much I do believe in measurement, but I don't believe that measurement tells you anything true about the world.
Yeah.
Even when you say this is a meter long, I actually don't think it's telling you it's a meter long. I think it's telling you that some property of an object is something that's got 1 on it, and
Yeah.
the perception, the dials of your perception is telling you that's something that's this big. But anyway,
It's one of the things that it's 1 unit of the thing we call a meter.
Yeah.
No, and I agree with you in the scientific context. I think, like measurement in terms of like scientific research and so on is super valuable and can teach us one hell of a lot. But then when you flip it the other way to particularly like human behaviors, because it is an incentive, exactly as you say, like a measurement is an incentive to behave in a certain way, it often has like unintended consequences, because then people are not following what they think is the right thing to do at any point in time. They're following what is likely to give them the best score on the chart. And you see this like particularly in like education and healthcare now, where teachers and nurses and so on, like they've got all these, they're being measured on all of these like metrics that somebody somewhere in an office looking at a spreadsheet is like trying to optimize so that they can produce a report that they give to someone higher up and so on, that then eventually gets the government. If it's a good result, they can send it to the press, and if it's a bad result, they'll just keep it quiet. And but ultimately you've got all these people who are working in the education system and the health system, who I have been hearing it for years and years. I mean, my mum used to talk about it years ago. She used to be like a preschool teacher. And even there, you think preschool, surely they're not like obsessed with measurement. And she used to complain about it. They're like, we used to just be able to try and like nurture the children and really care for them. And now we're just constantly filling in forms, and, we've got to we've got these inspections and we've got to get a good grade and all of these sorts of things. But the grade is based upon the forms that you filled in and all this stuff. Whereas that, so I think there's
what is the actual impact for the child? Like, what is the child really like learning? And that's not
so we're often measuring the things that are easy to measure and make certain people look good within the structure of our society, rather than measuring the things that really matter. Like, if we had a way, in that example, if we had a way of actually genuinely measuring the well-being and development of those children, we somehow like just like psychically tapped into them, and it all got plotted on a graph, then the incentive would be exactly what you want that incentive to be. But because we don't have that, we have these like kind of really crap metrics that just measure the thing that's easy, which is like, oh, did they fill in the form and did they say these things, and we'll rate them out of 5. And
what is the education system even designed for in the UK? It's designed, or was designed, to make children or to make young adults who fit into a new into the industrial economy, which fascinatingly is what's kind of completely changing today. So they're all the education system these days arguably is completely unsuited for the world that children are being sent out into. And I remember also from the medical, I mean, there's great things to say about kind of the NHS and kind of other areas in the UK, but I've had a lot of, I remember because when our first child, we were planning for our first child, my wife convinced me to do a home birth. We were having lots of conversations over it. And it was really fascinating through that whole process. I realized that all of the things that I just kind of bedded into society and kind of really repeated to you by the medical establishment and by the NHS, and kind of almost just subtly kind of bred into you, are just nonsense. It's just complete untruths. The fact that, if you're in that ecosystem, your job, what the NHS is what the metric they're optimizing is making sure that you walk out of the hospital alive. That's it. And I mean, I don't mean that in like an obvious way. I literally mean like, if you're going to give birth in a hospital, everything they're optimizing, all that measurement is just, we want to make sure that mother and that child walks out of this alive.
Yeah.
There's very little or almost none thought and attention that goes to what do we need to do to make sure that in 6 months, 6 years, 15 years, that child has a better chance. And so like things like having a home birth or having a vaginal birth or breastfeeding, all of these things are the kinds of activities that you need to have to ensure that the child then has like all of the microbiome and the bacterial and the support system so they can actually survive like afterwards. But that's not the priority of it's a very laudable priority, which is make sure they get out of that door alive. But this is the same thing. It's like measurements factor in different things. But you're right, like some things are immeasurable. And I really struggle with this because I think a lot about measurement all the time. And one of the reasons Oliver Winks kind of responded to the measure, because me and Oliver talk about measuring things, like that's what his company does. That's kind of what we do. We just talk measuring all the time. So I can completely understand kind of that attitude here. But how do you measure? Yeah, like how it is just really impossible to measure any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that's what I mean. And so you get into this sort of reductionist place where, because you really want to have clarity and to be able to take actions based upon data, you end up sometimes compromising the integrity of the thing you're measuring in order to make it, in order to choose something that is measurable and simple, rather than accepting the kind of the messy complexity of things. And I think there is like, there's a place for both, but I think our society as it is tends to lean more on the like measure the thing rather than
or at least give us a number. I wouldn't even say I don't think society like particularly cares about anything other than,
I don't care how you measured it. Just give us a number.
Don't care how you measure. Let me know who to blame is basically the where I think it ends up. So I think we're there's something here. I still think it's like, when I go back to kind of it didn't summarize it, but I think one of them is the power one.
I didn't mention that.
Add the power one, so the power. So I believe that like the concentration and dilution of power, and I choose, but whether or not I choose, I could even phrase that in the same way, which is like, if you're going to give up power, make sure it's worth it. I mean, I think there's that angle to it as well. But you were almost saying there's two dichotomies, there's two like angles to everything. So there's power and concentration and dilution of power. There's suffering and whatever the opposite of. There's the value. There's the value from suffering.
Yeah.
There's these new spectrums.
There's these spectrums, exactly.
The spectrums, yeah.
Yeah.
What were the other ones it was saying? Hang on. Integrity and
authenticity and integrity. So just to give you what it meant by that, it basically says, I'll read it out. We both express frustration with tribalism and dogma in the sustainability community, and we value actions that are rooted in personal conviction over conformity.
God, that just sounds like me.
Yeah. And it's interesting for me because this ties in with something that I've been having in my mind for a few episodes to propose as a principle, but haven't, which is, well, there's kind of two together, and actually they're both in the Sustainable Web Manifesto, interestingly. Which is openness and honesty, or transparency and honesty. Honesty is arguably more important to me. Because two reasons. One, I think if we're not having honest conversations, then what are we even talking about? Like, we might as well just not bother. But secondly, I think like honesty fundamentally is a sort of a benevolent quality. Like we want an honest society. I think most people would agree that we want an honest society. Whether it's feasible or not is a separate question.
What do you mean by honest? What does honest
What I mean by
to you?
honest is that people are expressing what they genuinely believe to be true. Doesn't mean it is true, because we don't have objective truth.
Yeah.
But they're intentionally attempting to express what they believe to be true and avoid deception. Like they're trying to, like, we all deceive, like, to some extent for various reasons in different ways, but we would attempt not to. And like we talk about greenwashing and things like that, that's like an obvious example of deception.
Well, I think
deception.
A lot of people who get labeled as greenwashing right now are being honest and just trying.
Yeah.
And
like and the fact that we often feel like we can't have those conversations also is, like, to me, is a strand of honesty, one part of honesty is just when you speak, like, speak what you believe is to be true. But another part of honesty is also speaking when you feel it is necessary, because silence in itself can be deceptive. So,
I like that. I like that.
Like we talked about the Gaza thing, and, like, a lot of people being silent on it, and that in itself is, like, they're not lying, but they're not expressing what they truly believe. They're keeping that to themselves because they feel, for whatever reason, they feel that they can't express it.
Well,
so
it's linked to I think that's really, I think that I don't know if we're wrapping all of that stuff, like openness, honesty, direct feedback. I mean, I think that kind of like that's what is being direct, I suppose, is where that's landing with me the most. Like from a very personal perspective, that's kind of been my biggest weakness in, as a leader and, generally a human being on this world is a complete, like, inability to give, like, really honest feedback to people. Because it's really hard. It's actually it's the hardest thing to ask people to do, is to kind of give really, like, tough feedback.
Yeah.
There was a book I read. I'll get it while I'm talking, and it was like, listen, just do it. It was kind of like, it was two things. It really got to me. It was like, when you're umming and ahhing about how to give somebody feedback, and you're like, you've read all the articles, and there's so much information about how to actually, like, craft this thing, and you shouldn't do this and you shouldn't do that. And it was like, you just do it. You don't care. It doesn't matter. Like, holding on to that information because you haven't quite figured out how to express it in such a way that doesn't hurt the other person's feelings is actually still really, really bad. So you just got to do it. You've just got to say it. And the other one was, like, a real realization for me from that whole, like, a watershed moment for me for giving feedback, was just the realization that I'm actually making the other person better. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm literally, my goal is just to make you better. And so it's almost an expression of love. It's like, I'm trying to make you better, which is, my wife doesn't understand any of these subtleties, because she is, like, just direct in them. And, like, I've had to learn how to be, we've had this family meetings where I've had to explain to everybody, no, she's not arguing with me right now. This is just, we're just having a normal conversation. This is normal. But that is, like, really powerful. I think there's something there. I mean, I suppose to give direct feedback, it has to be honest, because otherwise you're just being an a-hole and you're just telling somebody something mean for no like you're lying about it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
you
Yeah.
have to be honest. Being open is about being very direct with kind of like what you're saying. It feels very like in line with kind of like the whole scientific methodology of like, listen, I saw what you published. I disagree with it. This is why I disagree with it. You know, I think there's like
Well, then
a
you've got open
there's a
dialogue.
direction. Yeah. But also the silence aspect of it is really important as well, because not giving that feedback is bad.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
So
mean,
it's
one of the things I
feedback and no
learned
feedback.
the hard way, because I definitely am one of those people who tends or has historically tended to avoid conflict.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean
Yeah.
conflict in terms of argument, but just like difficult conversations.
Mm.
And had this, the big fear of hurting people's feelings and so on. And one of the big things I learned was that, like, often actually when you think you're being kind, you're not being kind. You're really being
Yeah.
selfish, because what you're doing is you're telling yourself a story that I'm not going to tell them the truth, which is challenging, because I don't want to have that conversation and I don't want to feel
Yeah.
bad. And actually it's really to protect yourself more than it is to protect them. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
to protect them as well, but often the thing that's really stopping you getting the words out of your mouth is like the fear that like they'll perceive me as a bad person, or I'll feel guilty, or
Yeah. Yeah. We all want to be
whatever.
loved, and we
Yeah,
all
you want to be loved. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It all
Yeah.
comes back to these like really root things.
Yeah.
But as you say, when you just get it out, then like you only do that if you're doing that with compassion. So it ties in with the other one. If you're doing that with compassion, that like, I'm not being an asshole. I actually genuinely think this is an important thing to like have on the table, or an important thing for you to know. Then you're not trying, even if you sometimes muck it up and you deliver it, like you don't deliver it in the best way, your intention is to give them the information that they need so that they can then do something with it, so they can improve or learn or whatever it might be. And over time, practice, we'll all get better at that if we actually do it. So I think that as long as the intention is compassionate at its core, it's a healthier place to be in terms of like human relationships, and just wider culture in terms of things like scientific research and building companies and these sorts of things.
Isn't it linked to one of the 4 agreements you were mentioning? Is this one of the 4 agreements? What was it?
It is. So the 4 agreements, which for anybody listening is a book by Don Ruiz something, but he's a Toltec guy. He wrote this book, and they're like basically the 4 core principles, like Toltec principles. And be impeccable with your words is principle 1. And I mentioned this before, that he explains it as words are not just words we say out loud or write down. They're also words that we think in our heads. If you're thinking bad things about people, somehow that's coming out in your behavior, even if those words have never come out. So trying to self-monitor, not self-censor, but self-monitor, so that you actually can bring your own thoughts and behaviors, so speech and so on, in line with what you truly believe. Like, it is honest, whatever you're saying and doing and thinking. But then his other agreements, basically, they tie in with that. So another one is, don't take things personally, which actually is more about like being on the other side of that honesty. Which is the fact that there's all sorts of things happening around us all the time. And if we want to live in a world where people are honest, then we need to be able to like just kind of accept that sometimes we'll hear things that we don't want to hear. And it's our job to take that in a constructive way. And if someone does say something to us in a really arsey way, to just understand, like, well, they probably got something going on, and like, don't like ruin your day over it. Just try and take the core message and separate it out from whatever shit they've got going on. And then another principle, part of that was, again, relates into it, is don't make assumptions. So this also sort of ties in with openness in a way, which is like there's lots of stuff we just don't know, and we're just kind of constantly making assumptions to join the dots, and often thinking that somebody else did something for a certain reason, or we think they're thinking something that we don't even know what they really are thinking, or we're like reading between the lines. And actually, we should just say, well, if I don't know, I don't know. And if I really want to know, I should go and try and find out, rather than making an assumption.
Ask questions,
Ask questions, exactly, which ties in with curiosity, which is one of these other things on this list. And what is the fourth? That's 3 of the four agreements.
I think you always forget the fourth one.
I always forget the fourth one.
First time you've forgotten the fourth one.
Probably the most important of the 4 agreements, isn't it?
Don't forget.
Don't forget.
Yeah.
I'm going to look it up.
You're going to quickly look it up, aren't you? Yeah.
Do your best. That's the easy one. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the easy
one.
It's
simple.
Do your best.
Just do your best.
Well, you did your best. You did your best. You just forgot. Yeah. Just forgot. Yeah, it's okay. You did your best.
Which is nice because it acknowledges that we're all imperfect on some level. Well, the best you can do is just to do your best.
I don't feel we're not converging at this point, but these are all good stuff. I was thinking the other day. One of the things I was thinking after the last episode that we had was just, are we like perhaps looking at this wrong? Because one of the thoughts I had was that, we're trying to, I sometimes I think that, one of the things you say is like, well, are we trying to figure out what the greater good is? Are we trying to figure out what the right answer is? What's the right way of living? For what? For what reason? For who? What are we trying to figure out what the right way of living is? I gave the story about how I massacred aphids to save my beans.
That really has been...
I don't care about aphids. Just don't care about them. Don't. I hate them even more this week than I could possibly hate them last week.
You know what? It's been a real conundrum for me. I've really been thinking about that a lot.
You really? Yeah, it's a hard one. It's like why about it's like so maybe, and when we talk a lot about tribalism in just you and me, we've been talking a lot about tribalism and breaking out of the tribalism, and maybe we just accept the fact that that's all that the world is tribalism. And that we're never ever going to break out from this whole way of tribal thinking, right? Because that's one of the ways I've been battling it in my head is like, oh, all these tribes, you're such an idiot. You're in a tribe. I used to be in a tribe. I'm not in a tribe anymore. I am in a tribe. I'm just in a different tribe. Right now I'm in a tribe of 2, or maybe 3 or I don't know. It's a tribe of 2, right? But that's all. Like maybe that's all this ever is that you just pick a tribe, and it's not about the tribe is good or the tribe is evil or anything like that. You just pick a tribe, and that tribe has a purpose and a goal. And originally that, for life on this planet, that the purpose and the goal of a tribe is just to survive, and that was it. So you did what you did to make your tribe survive. Maybe nowadays the goal is a bit loftier, but you just pick a tribe and that's it. I mean, that kind of aligns in with, a lot of just how the world works is that, and maybe all that we're saying is that, like, look, that tribe that's telling you that if you do all these things, the world will be a better place. We don't think they're telling the truth. We don't think we just don't agree with what they're saying. And we will just create our own tribe. And you know what? Our own tribe will have our own dog. They'll have their own dogma. They'll have their own. What did you say? We are a culture is a people who look like us that do things like this.
Culture. The definition of culture. This is Seth Godin's definition. Just means people like us do things like this.
People like us do things like this. So we'll create a tribe, and then people like us do things like this. And that's kind of like really. I mean that. That really makes. I think that's kind of if I really go down deep inside me, I think that's kind of like where I'm struggling with a lot of this stuff is we're trying to find there's this equation and we're trying to plug in values for X, Y, and Z so it all balances out to 0, but it never will.
Yeah.
that never ever will. It's just we're just saying, listen, that whole thread of things is just wrong. We're never going to convince you to join here. You're just going to do whatever you want to do. And we just need to create a thread that, tries to do things a different way, bring people into our tribe that just do things a different way. And I don't know if that's kind of like, I don't know if I know we're trying to come up with, the principles of sustainability, but like, why? Like, what is our tribe?
Yeah, the
like
why.
You can have all that's the thing. That's I suppose where I'm struggling with all that. When we talk about these principles, my mind goes to, right, if somebody had this principle, what would they do in this situation?
Yeah.
And is it okay that a bunch of people hold these principles and then still decide to do things that maybe we would feel that's actually not what our intention was? I mean, do you know, like,
Yeah.
that's kind of like my
which is
worry,
inevitable,
is that we're trying to
right?
engineer.
Yeah. I mean, I think the word tribe is interesting because it has certain connotations depending on your pre-existing bias towards the word. And and I think one of the things that we both seem to resist is the dogma of tribalism, where it's not aligned with necessarily like your inner truth. It's just you're part of a group, and the group tells you what to believe, and so or what to do, and then you kind
Tom, what I'm saying is maybe sorry to interrupt, but maybe what I'm saying isn't that I hate the dogma of tribes. Maybe what I'm saying is I hate the dogma of their tribe. But
yeah.
I would love the dogma of our tribe.
Well, what I was going to say was that you could flip the whole idea of a tribe and call it a community, and which we often do in the sustainability world, right?
Yeah.
And but forget I know what you've got in your head.
Yeah, I've got a thing in my head about community that's not positive.
Yeah, exactly. But think about real community in the terms of like people who are closely, like they care about each other and they help each other out. So it's not it doesn't even need a name. Like real community doesn't need a name as a group. You don't need, it's like, oh, we're the sustainability community. That's not a real community. A real community almost is kind of this amorphous thing where people somehow are connected and they help each other out. Like there's people I know in the local area. We're not part of any group, but we're sort of like connected in this. Like I know that like Nick knows Kate and Kate knows Sammy, and we're all kind of into some of the same things, but also some different things. But there's like a path you can plot that we're connected and we care about each other as human beings, and we might help each other out with certain things from time to time and spend quality time together and stuff like that. So I think a real community is rooted more in like love for other human beings. I mean, it could be other non-human beings, but let's start somewhere. Rather than like a community with a name often is what we think more of as a tribe, where once you've got the badge and the t-shirt and the cap and everything, like you're then just sort of a cog in the machine, rather than like, you might not even really know people that well. You might not really have like real personal human relationships with that many people, but you somehow consider yourself part of the community because you've joined the club and you've got the badge.
Well, I think that because I would say that just because a community, just because a group of people you're connecting with doesn't have a name, it's just, you just pick a GUID and it's and then that's the it's just like you're identified somewhat together, whether you vocalize it with a word. But I can kind of see that. I like one of the things I've been talking to inside the foundation about is how I differ. I had a difference between a community and a movement. I don't know if I exposed it to you. So a community is just a group of people with shared interests. That's it. That's it. Doesn't really mean anything. Just a bunch of people with shared interests. I express this in a visual image of like just a literal village with a bunch of people like just pointing in different directions, doing whatever they want to do. Then I express this idea of a movement, and a movement is people who are coordinated and organized, and they have an intent, and they're trying to do something. And I visualize that through like a bunch of people who are all walking in the same direction through the village in a march. They're marching through a
the
village.
movement.
Hence the movement. There's a movement aspect to it. And so when I think of a tribe, I probably think something more like a movement than a community, because, you know, a tribe has like, is trying to do something. My image of a tribe is trying to do, and I know like these days you can have like tribal things which are just like, they're so big, they're just, I'm part of this tribe from, you know, Middle East and places like that. It's just, it doesn't mean you're trying to do anything other than perhaps maybe. No, I take that back. I would say if you say you're part of a tribe, if I say I'm part of a community, all I'm really doing is I'm expressing the fact that I share some interest with these people.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to make that community do anything. I don't feel, because it's not got a movement, it's not got structure. We can't even really take responsibility or have any expectations for that community to do anything. But I can have that expectations for a movement and for a tribe. Like a movement is like, we want to do X. Like Extinction Rebellion is a movement.
Yeah.
Right. It's not a community to have like, you know, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I resist the word tribe just because there's so much, there is so much dogma that often comes with people joining a tribe, whether it's a football club or whether it's something, you know, something else, something more, well, I'm not going to say more meaningful. That's not fair. People who are into their football, like they think that's the most meaningful thing, and who am I to say? But I like the idea of a movement more because also the whole idea of a tribe, it feels very like adversarial. You know, it's like somehow there's an implication of battle between tribes, that they believe in different things and they're trying to like fight against each other for whatever it is that they're battling for. Whereas I think a movement is more, there's a more peaceful implication to that word, that we're just trying to achieve something in the world, in life, and we're all trying to achieve the same thing. And then it's more like the early idea of a company. Well, I mean, companies have been around for, you know, centuries, but the idea of when the idea of like company law came in, companies had to have a purpose, and the purpose was fundamental to the formation and the existence of the company. So it might be like, we want to build a bridge across the Thames so that we can connect the two sides, and so we're going to form a company and we're going to build a bridge. So we'll raise some money and we're going to build a bridge. And then at the end of that, we're going to close the company down because we will have built the bridge. So we're done. And then we'll all move on,
like
and we'll, yeah, exactly. And we'll move on, and we'll do whatever we want to do next. So it's not like a religion. It's not a tribe in a kind of religious dogmatic sense. It's a group of people who came together to do something, and they did it.
Yeah.
Because they thought it would somehow be a good thing to do. And and obviously there are people who come together to do things that I might not agree with, but as a general concept of how people come together, that resonates with me a lot more. And I think the word movement is actually quite a nice way of describing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would clarify, I would say, you know, you said tribe feels a bit adversarial, but I do feel we need a little bit of that, because I suppose that's not what we have. We don't have that already. As in, I suppose if you're part of this movement and you're presented then later on with a choice from another movement or this movement, and you choose the other's movement, then you're by definition not part of this movement, if that makes sense. if you're not making decisions, then it's just a community, is what I'm saying. It's like that there has to be let's say it's a movement, and we want everybody to ensure that like the UK government adopts policies and bills that kind of supports sustainability in kind of the classical sense. And then members of that movement are faced with like they could either vote for that or vote for something else. It's completely separate, and they choose the other thing. I think by definition that means you're not part of this movement. That's kind of like where there has to be. It can't just be so. We talk about. We said before, like that there has to. We're scared of conflict. Like there can't be. There has to be a thing. There are moments when there are kind of limited options and limited resources and limited everything where you do have to get people to agree with you or not agree with you. Like there's this. You mentioned kind of the Erica Chenoweth like 3%. All you need to do is to change 3% of a population and you get a revolution. Was what I was saying. There's also something from, I think it's Nassim Taleb, called the minority rule. Have you heard about I always say, have you heard about? I'm just going to say it. There's something called the minority rule, which is just a really fascinating thing that he figured out. I think he was having a barbecue one day, and there were some Orthodox Jewish people at his barbecue, and he had some beers, and he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I forgot to check if it was kosher." And they said, "Oh, is it American beer?" And he went, "Yeah." He goes, "Don't worry, it's all kosher." He went, "What do you mean?" He goes, "All beer in America is kosher." And what it basically, and he did like a whole research, and he basically came up with something called the minority rule, which is, and it's not just there's an Islamic version of it as well. So like I believe all lamb in America is halal or something like that, despite the fact that I think it was like 0.1% of Americans are kind of Orthodox Jews. Despite that, all the beer is
kosher.
Beer. I think it was Coke. It might have been Coke actually. I would say beer. Might have been soft drinks. Is kosher, and the similar goes for lamb. Like maybe 1% is Muslim, but all the lamb is halal. And there was some though, and he came with this set of rules for which what is the situation in which a tiny minority can affect a majority? It's a very interesting question for us in our space. Like, what is the rules? And number one, it has to be the minority has to be intransigent on their decision.
Yeah,
right? Intransigent. Like it's all or nothing. Like there's no wiggle room. We will only eat halal meat. We will only eat kosher meat.
it's non-negotiable.
It's non-negotiable. And the majority, it has to be like the change for the majority has just got to be like, meh, whatever. I don't really care. I mean, it's the same to me. Like it's halal meat, halal lamb versus normal lamb just tastes exactly the same. It doesn't cost anything different. Same goes for like, it doesn't cost me anything different. So it has to be like fairly flexible.
Yeah.
But the minority has got to be fully intransigent. They've got to be, is intransigent the right word? Yeah,
like
I think it's intransigent.
They're inflexible. They won't.
Inflexible completely, which means that the minority rule usually only comes to play when it comes to kind of religious things, because that's religion tends to be the people, the religious rules tend to be the ones people are most intransigent on. But I was thinking about when I read that, and I was thinking like, well, hang on, like what if our movement, our community was intransigent on a bunch of issues? I think one of the reasons is we're not. We're so flexible. Like, oh yeah, we totally want renewable energy, but it's going to cost a lot of money. Maybe let's not do it then. It's like no, there's got to be like if it's just like, listen, under no circumstances, this is it. End of story. There are, that's kind of, so coming back to the point, like that's the kind of, maybe that's the conflict that's got to be like, the movement has got to be like firm on these are our points, they're non-negotiable. Yeah, there's got to be some,
Yeah.
pressure wave, something. Yeah.
What sort of ties those things together, though, is, well, there's a couple of things here. One is that the thing that they're arguing over is a matter of principle, it's not actually a matter of being adversarial for the sake of being adversarial, if you know what I mean. It's not like, oh, we just think our people are better than yours, and so we want to somehow fight with you and steal your fields and your women, It's like it's actually like there's some it's more subtle than that. It might subtle as in, maybe not subtle, it's more, there's more of a purity to it. Like there is a moral principle underneath it, like underneath halal or underneath kosher, there is something, a belief system underneath it that says we think this is the better way, and we're not prepared to budge on it. It's not because we've got anything against you other people. We're not. So it's not about being adversarial with people. It's about like ideas.
Not forcing it. They weren't even trying to they weren't even saying everybody's got to do it.
Yeah,
they were just saying
it just happens because it's easier.
We're the only ones who are going to. We're only going to do this. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. So it's, I guess my concern with the word tribe is just that it does have this sort of this history and connotation of identity fighting for the sake of identity fighting or resources or whatever, rather than a belief in some sort of progress and respect for other people. And, like the minority rule actually is a kind of an acknowledgement of diversity and just saying, well, yeah, look, some of us really care about some things and it matters to them. And the majority of us don't really care about that thing, but we're not that bothered. So we'll let them have it. Which is actually like, it's kind of almost the opposite of being adversarial. It's actually being really cooperative. You're like, yeah, go on then. You can have it. It matters more to you than it does to me.
Yeah, yeah. But only works if it doesn't cost the majority.
Yeah. They don't have to really sacrifice anything.
They don't have to sacrifice that much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see where you're going. So yeah, so we don't, not wanting to have something that is adversarial. I do think some identity aspect to this is important. I think people want to identify. I think that's kind of a way. I mean,
I guess what I mean is I'm not saying identity is wrong, because that's what I meant by diversity is a great thing. I'm more saying that fighting over identity and trying to impose your identity on other people is what the concern I have around the connotation of tribes. Being in a group and having an identity for that group because you actually believe in it and so on. It's that's cool. Yeah.
And I think that's important. I think that's what we've, in a way, is what we've lost. And I think I strongly suspect that's it's one of the things that's going on in society these days, is that we've all lost a tribal identity. And however silly that sounds, I do think it's baked into us as a species. That's how we've lived until very recently. Very, very recently. People had very strong religious tribal identities, very, very strong religious tribal identities, and those have gone. And what's come in their place is other tribal identities have come along. We've just replaced one with the other. And when you look at a lot of the the political, especially in the US, it's almost like people. So I was walking down the street the other day. Oh God, I've gone off on tangent. I got to tell you, I was walking down the street the other day, and the guy was walking down the street with a T-shirt saying "Stuck Farmers."
Stuck farmers.
Stuck farmers. And it really I was thinking for a while. I was walking down the street. I was stuck farmer. Fuck Starmer. And it was written in a way. So it was all like that. So I was like, my God, that's the first person I've seen on a street with a strongly held, that's almost like a MAGA. You don't see that in the UK. This kind of like MAGA, like tribal things, but that's kind of like,
Yeah.
I think that's what's happened in the US. Is like people have lost their tribal identities, and then they're finding new tribe. That's what I think of when I think of like white supremacists. I just think of people who've lost some sort of tribal identity, and now someone's telling them, right, this is now your tribe. This is what we do.
Yeah.
And then the sustainability community, it's like a tribe. It's like this is what people like us do, things like this.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
all it is.
And I think
yeah.
I think I guess the thing that comes in all of that you mentioned earlier is the why. So it's like, okay, you're in this group, you want to do these things, but why do you want to do them? And why does that matter to you? And yeah, you can have these values. We could say, oh, we're proposing that these values of sustainability or principles of sustainability might include compassion and authenticity and curiosity, whatever, right? And then, but why? And
why? Yeah.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think that's part of the problem here. Is I think that ultimately that's quite a personal thing, but then you're trying to put it in a group context and have everybody have the same same principles and the same why behind them.
But what I mean, like we're talking because we've seen a broader, like, why. I mean, I think we're still, and maybe let's have that conversation about why are we even doing the stuff that we're doing? I mean, I see it as like a protection of. I truly do see it as a protection of the spiritual and physical manifestation of life on Earth.
Yeah.
I see it as like what we have here is unbelievably unique and special, and we just treat it as if we're just like nothing. We just treat it as if nothing. But there's both like a physical aspect to it, like we want to breathe, we want to be healthy, we want to have all this other stuff. But there's also a spiritual thing that we've lost. And I think that's one of the things that we're touching on, which is kind of broader than the typical sustainability narrative, which we're bringing kind of like the spirituality thing back into it. And how do we like live lives that are just in just like deeper connection with the earth, but fundamentally, like with one of some kind of earlier conversations, like we were saying, like, look, carbon, like nuclear war might literally be on our doorstep again, as of a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And, again, that scares the shit out of me more than anything to do with carbon. I mean, I will do anything. That is something that like, this movement should be just as much about anti-war and anti-nuclear and stopping that.
Yeah.
As it is from anything to do with carbon. I don't know. Like,
absolutely.
Is that the list? Should we like, if we listed then it becomes a bit dogmatic. I admit it becomes like a bit like set in stone. But do we is this movement an anti-war movement, an anti, not just climate change, but like, Christ, all the planetary boundaries, all of the issues? Do we I don't know.
I think it does. When it comes down to it, it's probably more constructive to go that way. I mean, I always prefer to go with like a positive framing for things, because I feel like it's better to aim towards what you do want than what you don't want. So I'd rather be pro-peace than anti-war, even though they're the same thing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But yeah, when you frame it that way, then it brings up things, in my mind. I was like, well, like poverty and homelessness, for example, is something that actually is like an immediate thing that I've always thought, like, why can't we solve this? This is outrageous. It's ridiculous. And to me, that falls under this kind of bigger sustainability umbrella. But actually, when you just talk about carbon, you're not really talking about any of that stuff. It's just it's this thing about measurement again. We're just measuring this thing.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
then
I
we
think
lose
the reason carbon. I honestly, sorry. I think honestly the reason why we are hyper focused on carbon is only because we can measure it. That's it. Anybody can measure carbon. I can measure carbon right now because it's in the air around me, and that's it. But I can't measure ocean. I can't measure, forever chemicals in the ocean. I can't measure the pollutants inside my body easily. But I can measure. Anybody can measure carbon easily, which is why we're just hyper focused in on it.
Well, you say that. I mean, I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but
yeah, go on. I go off on loads. So you're the right. Yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think that's actually true. I think we can't measure carbon that easily. I think you can measure carbon, like atmospheric carbon, at a particular point in time and space quite easily. But the number of places in the world where the equipment exists to do that are actually relatively few. Like I can't do it right here. But there's a lot of people out there who go to work and what they believe they're doing is measuring carbon. Actually, what they're doing is they're filling in numbers in an app or a spreadsheet, and they get, there's a formula and they get some numbers out. They never actually measured any gas. And equipment does exist to measure toxins in the oceans and, methane and other like gases in the atmosphere and, and other parameters. But with some reason locked onto carbon. So it's actually, there are lots of things we could be measuring. But we have this sort of charade of, I'm going to call it a charade because it is, that we're measuring carbon when most of what we're doing is guesstimating carbon based upon some things that, it's like what you said last time about follow the science. And it's like, well, have you actually read the scientific papers? And in most cases, the answer, for most people, the answer is no. And the same thing is true with measuring carbon. It's like there are people out there, they go to work and they measure carbon. But most people who are involved in measuring carbon have never done that. So, I don't know. I mean, so... No. I'm really confused. I'm confused, if I'm being honest, as to why exactly we locked onto carbon.
Yeah. Given
as opposed
to other things, which are honestly far more frightening. Again, like I don't know the toxins that I'm consuming on a day-to-day basis. I do think there is. Yes, I agree with your statement that measuring carbon is not as easy as I just said, but comparatively to the other issues that are facing us, it is easier. As in, I'm pretty sure I could like do a bit of research and buy some sort of device that can measure carbon in my garden. I do not know how I could measure, other than kind of finding an organization where I can send blood samples to, and it'll be quite expensive, like to measure kind of toxic, and they'd only be able to measure a subset of it. And there are.
But for example, I've seen there's a really cool little thing, I've forgotten what it's called, that you can buy, which is like a NOx, no, nitrous oxide. Well, no, what is it? I'm muddling things now. It's like particulate, there's the fine particulate, like diesel particulate emissions.
Right.
And it's like a few hundred quid. There's this nice little device that you can, but there's an app and you can take it anywhere and it will just like run for a minute and it will tell you the level of like certain types of particulates in the atmosphere in that place. And I was like, that's a cool little thing. Anyone who can afford to spend a few hundred quid on an air measuring device could have one of them, and they can take it anywhere they go and find out like what's the, on the main road where I live, like what's it like in the school playground where my kids go, what's the air quality like? And that's actually like a really tangible thing that we could be measuring.
But we don't. Yeah. So there may be something else is going on. Why? I don't know. There is something reductionist about the whole carbon that's very appealing.
Yeah, Yeah,
Or
absolutely.
maybe I also believe it's this. I just think that kind of like knowledge just layers on top, on top, on top, on top, and systems just grow, and people don't realize that people then you walk into a system that's working with all these cogs and engines and machines, and you just assume, oh, it's because that's just kind of, it's because it's right. That's
Yeah.
why this system's in place. And all of my experience over my life has just told me, no, it's just a system
Yeah.
that just happened. And you can walk in and just completely like one of like bring Trump into the equation, because why not? Like, one of the things that people like are often surprised with Trump is that he's just walked in and gone, no, I'm just going to do it a different way. And
Yeah.
everybody's like, you can't, it's a system. Well, no, I'm just going to do it a different way. And they're like, oh, you can just do that? Yeah, you can just do just a different thing that you do. I'm just. Oh, you have to listen to us. No, I'm not going to. What are you going to do about it? So, like, there are these systems and agreements and social contracts that we all have together that make us think that kind of this is just what life is, and I do it myself all the time. That's what I really love doing in any situation, is walking into something and if someone says that's just how we do it, I'm like, brilliant. Let's take a dive into that. Let's just take a dive into that's just how we do it. And then always it's like, no, we're going to do it a different way now, because it actually is based upon nothing. It was just some conversations that somebody had years ago, which got turned into something, which then got turned into something, and then it just became ossified into a process. So I don't know what I was going with. I don't know where I was. I don't know. I'm not too sure where I am. But
Well, we got lost in
we were talking about
measurement.
carbon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we flip? Because
Yeah.
we know I don't know if we're going to get anywhere where we are right now. And we did want to ask you about your recent trip.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and actually some of it's related.
Okay.
In a
Interesting.
very, very indirect way.
Yeah.
So I was I was back at the Monroe Institute last week, and so it's like a week-long meditation retreat with Monroe sound frequencies that generate certain brainwave states, and and this program is, so they've got a whole bunch of different programs they do for different things, but this one's called their guidelines program, and it's specifically about, I mean, in their language, it's tuning into like inner guidance, and you can interpret that however you want. Like, to me, that means tuning into intuition. Some people look at it as like finding their spirit guides, or, there's different ways you can frame the same kind of idea. So it was really fascinating, just as a week kind of, it was more of, a lot of it was similar to what I did last time a few months back, in terms of spending a lot of time in these meditations, exploring my own subconscious in what I would term, for me, is like similar to that like edge of sleep state, or lucid, almost like lucid dreaming, where you're kind of experiencing something, but you're aware that you're experiencing it, rather than in a normal dream where you don't realize you're in a dream. So for me, a lot of the week was actually interesting to just try and learn to develop that skill of being able to like see those things going through my own mind that are not my normal chatter of what are we having for lunch, like what time is it, how long is it, how long is this meditation going to last, kind of thing. But then like catch those things that pass through the mind really fleetingly, but are actually really I said profound, they might not be profound, but they're unexpected, and you didn't really put them there consciously. And actually then doing it in the meditations makes it easier to do it in normal daily life, because it's like your subconscious is trying to tell you something. Sometimes you're like, why did I end up thinking about that like really random thing? So just cultivating that skill was a lot of what I was doing this week, which I found really interesting and really, really helpful, because I'm really interested in intuition, and I believe in the value and the benefit of intuition. But the thing that really excited me the most was that the guy who ran the course, Luigi, he's a director of the Monroe Institute. He did the last program I was on in March. He bumped into a guy who's a remote viewing instructor at well, I say he's a remote viewing instructor. He's actually a professional ESP consultant, which I found hilarious
Right.
that's a thing you can be.
Yeah.
He bumped into him at a Science of Consciousness conference, and they got chatting, and sort of, I think they did some things together in the months in between, and he said like, oh, why don't you come along on this week-long program, and in the evenings and in the breaks, if people want it, you can teach them remote viewing, like as a kind of like a bonus on top of like the normal program that we're on. So we had this guy who's a like professional remote viewer, giving us like after dinner lessons and a few things during the week in the daytime as well. And I'd done a tiny bit before in terms of experiences of remote viewing. The first one I had, I think I might have mentioned before, was at a conference a few years ago, which we weren't even told we were doing remote viewing.
Right. Okay.
There was this meditation that was like a nature meditation, and it was really beautiful. We had to close our eyes for like 10 minutes, and we were just listening to it. And then but we all had an envelope, a sealed envelope, colored envelope on our seat, so you couldn't see inside it. Yeah. And we didn't know what they were for. And then at the end of this meditation, she then tells us that, like, while our eyes are still closed, she then tells us that every envelope has a different card inside it in the whole audience, and every card has a plant on it. And so the final thing we have to do in this meditation is to tune in and try to sense what this plant is in our envelope, and try to tune into like its size and its color and its, maybe its smell and its like qualities and these sorts of things. And she didn't say we're doing remote viewing. It was just like a meditation exercise. Anyway, I just got this really overwhelming sense that that there's like a tonic. The word that was really strong in my mind was tonic. And it was strange to me because that's a word I never really use. And I also got a sense of like roughly the size. I was like, it's sort of this big. It's not a massive thing. It's sort of bright green, about that big, which doesn't, that doesn't narrow it down much. A lot of plants fit in that sort of size and color category. But the word tonic was really strong. And then I opened the envelope, and it was cleavers, which is like a weed. And the first thing it said on it is it's like a really powerful tonic for like the liver or something. And I was like, oh my God, what just happened?
You'd read the words.
I read the words from the card. Anyway, so that was like my first taste of what you would call remote viewing. And for anyone who's listening who doesn't know what remote viewing is, I should just say it's basically trying to solicit information from something in existence in the universe that you don't actually have any tangible access to with your five senses. So you're trying to get information about what's called a target, but you have no way of gaining that information about that target within what we would consider like normal tangible means. So the envelope in that case was like, well, I have no way of seeing inside the envelope, but then I'm like picking up something. And then I'd had another experience on the previous Monroe program where we just, for fun, one evening we did a little remote viewing exercise, but it was fun, and it was quite insightful. Like that, some people in the group did get surprisingly like good results, but it was quite a mixed bag. And Luigi, who runs that program, like he's not a remote viewer. He just did it because it's kind of fun and tied in with what we were learning about. But anyway, with the tuition from this guy, this week, it just honestly, it blew our minds how good we were as a group. And I say good, I mean, I'm sure by a professional standard we were rubbish, but that's because a professional is getting like really detailed, granular information, and he showed us a load of like transcripts of things he's worked on, and it is really kind of mind-boggling. And they have this process of like, how I mean, it's a bit like when you generate an AI image now, but it's a bit like old bitmap images when you download them from the internet. In the old days, they'd come in like layers. there'd be like a first
Yeah.
pass that's like almost nothing. It's just like some color, and then like the detail will like build up in a few passes.
Yeah.
And so that they have this remote viewing process. It's a bit like that, where it's like the first pass is like just some really like vague sort of sense of qualities, and then they like drill down and get a bit more information about them, and then they drill down again until eventually they're like, it's the Large Hadron Collider at CERN. And you're like, okay. Which was actually one of the transcripts he showed us that was the Large Hadron Collider at CERN.
Right.
But the way that we did it as beginners is you get given a target, which is it could be anything, but the standard way of doing it is like an 8-digit number. So that you just get given the 8-digit number,
Right,
you get
okay.
given no information about it, and then you basically in silence. So you're not talking to each other as a group. In silence, you just keep kind of putting your attention on that number. And you close your eyes and you just try and sort of feel into what comes. Do I get any sense of color? And you ask questions. So you ping the target with your mind. So you'd like ping it to like ask it about temperature or size or texture or movement. And then they have these different like mind exercises you can do. So for example, one of them is like you imagine you're in like a blank corridor with a closed door at the end, and you imagine yourself running down that corridor and like bursting through the door, and the target's on the other side of the door. So when you burst through the door,
you see it suddenly, and it's like,
so what do you get?
It's like
and if you're a beginner, you're probably not going to get like a vision of the target, but you might get something like, oh, I've burst through the door and it was like there was like a hot wind. Something like that. And so there's all these different ways you can go about it. And anyway, it was just incredible how as a group the like success rate of getting stuff that you look at and you say tangibly, okay, we might not have named the thing, but the descriptions of the thing were like really, really on point. And they're very random targets. They're not all like some famous landmark, or they're not all like the pyramids of Giza. They have intentionally avoid things like that. So for example, one of them was a volcano erupting, and like near in a room of like 12 people doing the exercise, I think 10 out of 12 had basically described something that was like orange and hot, and there's rock, and often a lot of people had got like other things. Somebody had drawn like the little shape of a volcano, but they hadn't identified. They'd said mountain, but they'd actually drawn the little crater on the top. Somebody had said the Earth is ejaculating, which is like, well, yeah, that is like the vibe that you're getting from a volcano, right? So over the week, honestly, it blew my mind to see like the level of success and tangibility of the results when there's nothing in our explanation, like our mainstream explanation of reality, that says that this should be possible. What we should get as 12 people with our clipboards is we should get 12 collections of random words that all have nothing to do with each other. So when you've got this like quite high level of coherence among the group, and then it actually is coherent with the thing that's the target, that opens up some quite big questions about the nature of reality. And then one of the things so I asked him on like day 3 or something, what are we remote viewing? Are we remote viewing the target as a thing, as in like a real physical object or place or so on? Or are we remote viewing the photograph on your computer? Because when I spoke to you about it a few months ago, I thought it was the latter. I thought we're remote viewing the file on the computer. Right. And he's like, no, you're remote viewing the actual target, because that's why you can get sensory information like temperature and wind and texture, and you can like there's techniques where you can sort of pan around in your mind like in 3D and zoom in and zoom out, stuff like that. And I was like, okay. But if that's the case, then like if I generated like what looks like a photo from like Midjourney or something, like an AI generated photo, and then set that as a target for a group,
Right. It
what
shouldn't
would
be.
what would happen?
Yeah.
Like, surely they
Yeah.
could describe that just as well as they could describe it. And he said, no, with like that's because in the remote viewing like community, they they try all this sort of stuff out. And he said it's really hard to remote view an AI generated photo
Mm-hmm.
or
Just
just some
like
sort
a
of
fake. They could probably, even before AI, they would have just been able to like fake a picture or something. That doesn't
exactly.
exist.
Yeah, exactly. And he said that you can do it, but there's just very little information associated with the target because it's 2D and there's no smell, there's no texture, there's no temperature. It's just
So
some
the
color and
target is like
shape. 2D
the
color and
target is
shape.
almost like it's almost like a pointer to something
Yeah.
else. And if it doesn't point to something else, the target is the thing
Yeah.
that you're looking
Exactly.
at.
Yes.
It just fits so nicely with like, analytic idealism in that when you're looking at a picture of the pyramids, you're not really looking at a picture of the pyramids. Your consciousness is perceiving information that there's this 2D thing that points to this other thing. Like, so with analytic idealism, it's not even like there's no physicalism to the world. There's nothing that physically exists. Like the Giza pyramids don't actually physically exist. They just exist in this database of objects, to put it that way. And so when you're remote viewing, it is actually, you could argue that you're just reading, and that make it the analogy of the tech world. Your processor is just breaking the rules. Like you've got an API. How about this way? So there's this API for how we live the world. And so like you think you're experiencing with an API and you're supposed to make these calls to this API to like experience this. Like, I'm reading these pixels and that's what these pixels mean. But the API is just reading from like some database somewhere else and returning some information back to you. With remote viewing, you're just like, there is no spoon, there is no API. I'm just going to go direct to the database and like read the values into my head. And when you look at it from an analytic idealism perspective, that there is no physical reality, like remote viewing it almost doesn't, it's not like it makes sense. It's just how, remote viewing is just how we actually normally work every single day.
Yeah.
It's just that we limit ourselves to just saying, listen, we're only going to remote view it based upon these rules that whatever comes into these things that I call eyeballs is the only thing I can remote view. Whereas you just say, well, eyeballs don't exist. I'm just going to go to the source. So kind of like from an analytic idealism sense makes sense, but also makes sense from your like web of weird perspective. Which is like you're just sending out signals across like this web going, hey, I'm looking for this thing. And the web just sends you vibrations back. And then your brain kind of interprets it into something else. So it's not crazy. I don't know. It's just, well, it is crazy if you, for those listening, it sounds crazy. But trust me, once you dive into quantum physics, it's not crazy.
Well, exactly. This is the thing. And just one sort of interesting detail that comes off this idea that you're not remote viewing the file on the computer or the piece of paper in the envelope, but you're remote viewing the real thing, is that also means you're remote viewing not just space but time, because by definition the photograph you're pinging was taken in the past. And so if it's something in motion, like something that changes, like a volcano erupting, you're seeing you're getting the sense of the volcano erupting, but it's not, most of the time it's not erupting. So like one of the ones we did was the first spacewalk, the first NASA spacewalk in the 80s. So that's a thing where actually if you ping that point in space now, there's just space. Like he's not there. So you have to ping in, you're traveling in time and space.
But it's also, I don't think it's even time and space. It's kind of like time and conceptual moment.
Yeah.
Because even like a point in space doesn't really exist, because
Well,
if
this is the
there's no
thing.
such thing as a physical reality of space.
I think that's
So
the thing,
like,
and I think
yeah,
it highlights that it's not the time. Well, I have question marks over the nature of time, but but it does, as you're saying, it suggests that either there's like a physical reality, and then there's like some sort of information field that we can ping and get information about things in space, but also in the past, maybe in the future. But then, or that just there is no physical reality and everything is just an information field, which is where I lean if I'm being honest.
Yeah, that's how I feel. Yeah.
And we're like, I think your API analogy is bang on. That we're living, like, really, we're kind of living through this like graphical user interface. It's like very simple. Like, push the button. You know, we just learn it. We don't need to like. As a baby, you just kind of like it's plug and play. You kind of figure it out over you know your infant years, and off you go. But it's also quite difficult because you know people talk about sixth sense and they talk about intuition as being a sixth sense, and that's why it's really interesting that it kind of ties in with that, because what you're effectively doing is you're saying I'm going to try and get information about something in reality, in what we call reality, but without using my normal five senses. And then actually kind of proving that you were able to do that means that there is some sort of sixth sense, which probably, well, how that works, whether it's on a quantum level or whether it's just all of this is just, you know, all of this is just information anyway, and like we're overthinking it. I don't know.
The five senses are just like it's just information. So the sixth sense is just us realizing that everything is just information. And you can tap into it, and there's more raw sense.
Yeah, and it's the weakest of the six, right? Hence, we kind of don't think it exists because our vision is very strong, our hearing is very strong, you know, for most of us who have all the five working fully. And the sixth is like really, really faint.
Or just not. I don't know.
It's not well developed.
Useful. Yeah, it's not well developed. Maybe it used to be much more developed, and it is more developed in certain people than others.
Which you do see, like some people just have like really good intuition, and some people are just naturally really good at things like remote viewing, and some people are less so. Just like anything in life.
Mate, we're back full circle, because here's the problem. If there's no physical reality, what exactly are we fighting for?
I know,
because
right?
if there's no physical reality, why do we care that the Earth, which doesn't exist,
it's a brain teaser, this one. I think I mentioned in a previous episode, I read this book earlier this year called Life Before Life, which is about like reverse, what do you call it? Like regression hypnosis, taking people back to not past lives, but the in-between life space of like, where were you before you were born into this life? So pre-birth.
Right. Yeah.
And one of the things that was really interesting, just reading through all these people's cases, and obviously some people say, oh, this is just nonsense, they were just making it up. There's no tangible way of proving this. But it's interesting nevertheless. A lot of people seem to talk about purpose, but they talked about it in two ways. Like this whole idea of like life on Earth being some sort of school came up a lot. And there were a lot of people talked about like modules, and they didn't always use the word module. Some of them used the word module, some of them just used like other kind of equivalents. But essentially what they were saying is that there's things you need to learn as a being, I don't even know if soul is the right word, but just as a being that is like more than just this physical being that we are now. And you've got things you need to learn, and you enter into a human life with basically some modules you need to complete. It's like you need to learn about compassion, or you need to learn about, you know, fear or whatever it is, and
Yeah.
so that's like your kind of your purpose on an individual level. But then the other type of purpose people talked about, which often they talked about both, like they've kind of got two purposes for being here. One is like, I need to learn these things. And the other was, I'm here to contribute these things. So contribute that. And that often, sometimes that was like to the greater good of humanity or life. And sometimes that was very specific in terms of like people's lives that have like directly connected to them in some way. But I'm still trying to process this several months later of like, well, let's just say hypothetically that this is true. What does that mean for like what we're doing here, and things like, you know, like when we say, you know, we care about sustainability, like why am I here? Like, like what am I meant to be learning, and what am I meant to be contributing? And there is this paradox in that, you know, what you were just saying about like, if it's all basically a simulation, which that kind of ties into as well, that this is sort of like a, you know, you enter into like a virtual reality that is like got some scenarios in it for you to learn things, which I know is kind of a hard thing to think about for many different reasons. Like if one of your purposes is to make some sort of contribution to the greater good, like why does that matter if it's all a simulation? And I think where I'm at with it currently is it matters because the beings, the consciousness, as in like whatever that is, whether the beings in the simulation, at least some of them, hope maybe all of them, I kind of hope all of them, I don't know why, they're real beings that also are like, they're just in the like virtual reality with us. So when you create suffering for somebody, like that matters because there is a being on the other side of it that's experiencing that suffering.
But we've spoken about it before. It's like some of the things that you mean, if a module is dealing with this shitty roll of the dice that you've been given, then that suffering, you're supposed to have that suffering, and you removing that suffering is almost like you not even selfishly removing that suffering because you felt guilty about it, but actually I feel we keep on going around here. We're like, it's just this lost. I don't really know what it is that we're
That's a really fascinating point though, because there were people, and I've heard people in like other contexts talking about this as well, not, you know, completely outside the sustainability conversation, talking about how sometimes you when you're trying to help people, you're robbing them of their opportunity to go through an experience and have their own learning. And I think there's a delicate line between like helping people because they need help and they've asked for help, or being compassionate in the sense that you're trying to minimize unnecessary suffering that you're causing, but at the same time you're not thinking that you got to fix everything, because actually maybe some people, they just need to go through their own challenges, and you might be there for them in the sense that you like, if you need help, I'm here for you, but you're not. But actually, maybe sometimes their suffering is what they need.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And even you saying, I mean, a lot of the time, like for instance, not knowing you don't have a safety net and having to still do something is a really important, like, learning and growth opportunity, and then also failing to the point of almost, you know, death. It's a really important lesson. And then how do you, we've gone back full circle, how do you wrap that? Maybe suffering's got nothing to do with it, mate.
That's maybe we're way off track.
Maybe suffering's got nothing to do with this. And that, yes, compassion just means, look, we're all in it together, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's all it means. It just means, look, we're in it together. I'm in it with you. I feel it, but my goal is not to reduce I suppose maybe put it that way. That's a choice for me individually to make, but perhaps that's not really what I'm trying to. For me personally, what I'm trying to stop. I suppose there's suffering, and then there's like hey, let's nuclear war. I don't.
Mm.
Oh, you can put the argument of suffering in there. You have to survive a nuclear war, and then you'll learn your lesson.
Yeah, I
But
know, which
like
is the
there is
kind of
like
the really horrible side of this line of thinking, because then you're like, oh no, that's kind of just a disgusting thing to think,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
But it's like maybe what we're talking about is not the kind of nuanced, subtle points, but like what are the list of things that could ruin this situation we have on this planet forever?
Mm. Yeah.
Like Jeff Bezos, our favorite billionaire, one of our favorite show favorite, Jeff Bezos, um, has a saying which I love. I think he's a very intelligent person. He's made a lot of very clever points that I do follow. But one of his things was the idea. I think it was him. This idea of a two-way door problem and a one-way door problem, and I use that a lot. So there are certain problems which is a one-way door, and
Mm.
once you go through, you can't come back out, and then that's it. You pay your attention to those problems. If it's a two-way door problem, you just don't bother. You just like do whatever you need to. It's not a big deal. You can come back through it. But like, what are like the one-way door problems of the Earth? You know,
Yeah.
um, I think that's maybe that's one of the reasons like carbon is there. It's like a big, it's like a big one. And then
Yeah.
there's
And
like,
maybe you can
ocean
break the
pollution.
simulation, right?
You can break
Let's
the simulation.
and
You can just collapse it, collapse the
yeah.
whole thing. Like you couldn't possibly, the simulation can't like go, we're just going to remove all the carbon from the atmosphere to refix the simulation. It's not allowed to do that. It's not allowed
Yeah.
to have that. So like, if we were to coming back to the movement metaphor, it's like, it's like, there are a bunch of big things that I'm coming back to the same point again. It's almost like it doesn't matter. Like what if we just didn't care about justifying or rationalizing any of this stuff? And me just said, no, it is just anti-war or pro-peace. End of story.
Yeah.
That's the dogma. Pro-peace. It is just, I don't know what the rest of it is. It is just like this list of things. These are our points. This is what we care about. If you're part of this movement, that's what it is. End of story.
Mm.
And we don't really know and we also don't really know if this thing is real. And I'm also not really too sure if us doing this thing is ruining your reason for existing on this planet because you're supposed to experience all this negative stuff. But we don't care. We just don't care. This is just, we don't want to live in a planet. You could tell me all to the cows come home that person needs to have that suffering, being blown up or being buried alive or this and that and the other. But I'd be like, I just don't care. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's not gonna, just don't. Maybe that's what it is.
As in you don't care that the universe might have had a reason for that because fundamentally you feel like that's something that you don't want to happen.
I just don't want it to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that selfish? I don't know. Maybe selfishness is okay. It's okay to be a bit selfish and just say, look, I just don't want that.
Well, I think that also comes back to the intuition thing. I'm more and more kind of leaning in there. Hence, I spent a whole week exploring it last week.
So did you come out with any conclusions? Oh God, before you finish your point, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that on some level, if there is some sort of greater cosmic reason for us all being here that might be collective and individual, different for us individually as it is collectively, that we might never know what that is in a way that we can like put it down in words and then tell other people about it. But our intuition might be the best thing we've got to just sort of try and feel into like, well, this sort of feels like what I should be doing. This feels right to me, so I'm just going to go with it. Because I don't know. What better option do we have?
Yeah. I mean, if it was like a movement of people who followed, spiritual guidances who worked hard to, you know, through Monroe Institute or other mechanisms, you know, ensured kind of like as much as possible that they were as closely connected into to intuition, you know,
Mm.
and then collectively just made decisions on a you know, day by day basis, like
Yeah.
collectively, like look,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just, you know, but we've made sure, like we've done the brainwave thing, we've done the meditation, we've done the ayahuasca, we've done the iboga, we've done the rapé, we've done everything we need to do to cleanse
Yeah.
myself of all of my BS.
Yeah.
So that when I'm listening to my intuition now, my intuition is telling me, no, I don't want this war. This war's a bad war. Let's end this war. Let's end
Yeah.
the story. We're ending the war. Or do you know what? We're gonna ban meeting. I'm being absolutely like, you know, whatever it is. It's like maybe that's what it is. It's a tribe of people who are connected into, you know, their spiritual selves and actively working towards,
I think that's important.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah, actively. I think that's the thing we're missing, isn't it? It's like there's a spiritual aspect to this that's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not being addressed.
And
And then whatever decisions, and then making sure that whatever decisions they make is just we trust the decisions that they make. Yeah.
yeah. No, I think so. I think so. It's like heal yourself and follow your intuition.
Yeah. Well, I like that.
Yeah.
Oh God, I think you've just come up with the tagline for the movement: heal yourself and follow your intuition. Yeah.
And it's 5 o'clock.
It's
so
5
maybe we
o'clock.
should-
It's a point to end it. All right. That's a very good chat. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Hassan. Lots to think about.
Lots to think about. All right. Catch you around. We'll figure out later. See you later, mate. Bye.
Bye.